So I hope this is fine to all colleagues. Yeah. Okay, we will start. Colleagues, I'm Cecilia Thea Soriano. I'm from the Global Campaign for Education. And on behalf of the movement, I would like to welcome you all to the launch of Global Action Week for Education 2026 or GAWE 2026. Colleagues, this is our 24th year of solidarity and coordinated campaign. I'm sure many of you were younger 24 years ago, but here we are still working together in a coordinated way to advance the right to education. And so this is a testament to our collaboration and incredible energy that happens when committed people all over the world come together. We gather today amidst profound challenges, and we all know this. From the global south to the global north, we see the realities of the war, rising inflation, the strain of the ongoing oil crisis, the gender backlash, climate change, and we can all feel the increasing heat index and the many uncertainties that shape our daily lives. These issues are issues that touch our lives, our communities, our work, and our futures. And yet, it is precisely in times like this that gatherings or campaigns like GAWE 2026 become even more meaningful. Today, we also come together with a shared voice and a shared responsibility to stand strong in demanding the financing of quality public education for all. In face of crisis, education must not be sidelined. It must be protected, it must be strengthened, and made accessible to every learner, children, youth, and adults everywhere. Our collective presence here is a reminder that even in uncertainty, we can act together, we advocate together, we can push for education, for a better present, and a better future where no one is left behind. So, colleagues, before we begin, let us take a moment to check in with one another. And I would like to ask you, how is everyone feeling? Are you feeling energized, hopeful, worried of the uncertainties, or carrying the weight of the many challenges that we face? So, whatever it is, please choose an emoji. I hope you can, in the react button, choose an emoji and put that in the chat, or you can put that on your profile, so I can see Tasneem already with that muscle, So in the chat or on your profile, please put an emoji uh, to reflect how you are feeling today. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. And I see Rashida is okay. Josh is worried and a bit hoping for the best. Gavork is also okay. So thank you, colleagues. And in the chat, I would like you to put in your name, your organization, and country so we know who we are. There are so far 149 participants, 150, 151, increasing. So thank you for coming together in this GAWE launch. And please write on the chat your name, organization, and country so we know who we are. Yes. And so what is GAWE 2026? As I mentioned, we have been here 24 years, and many of the GCE members have been formed because of GAWE. Our theme this year is education financing, and our rallying call is hold the flame high for education. We want unwavering leadership. We want accountability. And therefore, in GAWE 2026, we will call for accountability to SDG 4. Colleagues, we all know that there have been a lot of discussions about post-2030 agenda. Post-2030 education is going to we are going to discuss this starting this year. But what we're saying, there are still 4 years until 2030, and we are calling on governments, donor partners, and international institutions to finance the full SDG 4 agenda and guarantee the right to education amidst all the crisis. And included in this advocacy is our advocacy for ODA for education. Secondly, we want the decision makers, our governments and donor partners, to finance quality public education. We are advocating for the transformation of public education systems so that public education systems will meet the education needs of the present and the future. Thirdly, we are pushing for sustainable financing. Our governments face shrinking fiscal space, especially now because of the crisis. Tax collection will be immensely difficult. In my own country, the tax collection had been extended for another month because people are finding it hard to pay their taxes. But we know that there are international barriers to financing the education and public services in our countries. We need tax justice. We need to change the global financial architecture. We need debt justice. And therefore, we will continue to advocate for a substantive UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, which is currently happening until 2027. And then we will also advocate for the convening of a UN Framework Convention on sovereign debt. So by reforming the global financial architecture, we will help our countries sustainably finance education and other public services. And colleagues, we all know GAWE 2026 is also for public mobilization. It's not only us, it's not only our organization, but also making sure that we are with our communities, we are with the grassroots organizations, with the academia, with the youth networks, with the teachers union to demand the right to education from our decision makers. So, colleagues, amidst the crisis, let us be strong, let us be determined, and let us work towards GAWE 2026 within this week, April 20 to 25. But as we know, education financing is our strategic advocacy beyond GAWE. So let me call our esteemed speakers. So to give us an opening remarks, I would like to call our very committed GCE President, Refat Saba. Over to you, Refat.
Thank you, Thea. I hope my picture is clearer.
Yes, it's clear. Yeah.
So, colleagues, friends, and partners, welcome and thank you for joining us at the start of this year Global Action Week for Education 2026. Our goal this year is clear: to hold the flame high for education. This movement has chosen to prioritize education financing once again because education is under threat across the world today. Countries are disinvesting, aid is declining, and the global crisis, conflict, climate change, economic instability are placing even greater pressure on already fragile systems. The scale of the challenge is stark. There is a almost 97 billion annual financing gap preventing countries from achieving quality education for all. And 41% of the countries are not meeting even the minimum benchmark of education spending. This is not inevitable. It is the result of political and economic choices. Too many countries are constrained by debt, austerity, and unfair global financing rules. Today, many spend more on debt repayment than on education. And once again, it is the most marginalized who are most affected: women and girls, migrants and refugees, Black and indigenous communities, persons with disabilities. At the same time, official development assistance is declining and the humanitarian aid is falling sharply. Yet, global military spending countries to raise, reaching $2.4 trillion. This contrast is impossible to ignore. Even a fraction of those resources could transform education system worldwide. Education is not just another sector. It is the foundation of peace, for resilience, for gender justice, and for sustainable development. In context of the conflict, where schools are attacked and lives are lost, education becomes not only a right, but a lifeline. Education financing is context of conflict and economic crisis worldwide clearly shows that declining resources affect not only access to education, but also extend to profoundly impact the social outcomes of education as the core of its development role. In Afghanistan, it's estimated that more than 3.7 million children are out of school, with widespread deprivation of girls' education, reflecting a decline in equality and women's empowerment. In Ukraine, more than 5 million children have been affected by the disruption to education or shift to remote learning, with thousands of schools damaged, weakening social coherence and affecting the social capital of generations. In Haiti, recruiting crises have led to the interruption of education for hundreds of thousands of children, limited education's ability to play its role in reducing violence and reproducing social opportunities. In Nigeria and Myanmar, conflict and instability have disrupted education for millions of children, deepening social gaps and weakening the role of education in building citizenship and stability. In the Arab world and in the Arab context, the picture becomes even clearer in the fragility of education systems under the pressure of conflicts and economic collapse. In Yemen, more than 2 million children are out of school, with widespread damage to education infrastructure, leading to an erosion of education role in enhancing social protection and reducing child labor and early marriage. In Syria, more than 2.4 million children have dropped out of education, and about one-third of schools have been damaged, resulting in weakened social capital and the fragmentation of community ties. In Sudan, more than 19 million school-aged children have been affected by school closure to disruption due to the conflict, threatening the role of the education in achieving social justice and reducing poverty. In Lebanon, the economic crisis have disrupted regular schooling for more than 700,000 children due to the repeated interruptions and financing pressure on the families, deepening educational and social inequalities. In Palestine, the destruction or damage of around 95% of Gaza schools and the deprivation of hundreds of thousands of students from education have undermined the role of education in building resilience, identity, and social coherence. These global and Arab examples confirm that the impact of a crisis in education goes beyond the infrastructure to dismantle the social outcome of education, including the promotion of justice, gender equality, the building of social capital, and the consolidation of values of citizenship and participation. When education financing declines on halt due to the conflict, it is not only learning that is lost, but also the capacity of education to produce cohesive and just societies erodes. Represent a strategy. Conversely, sustained investment in education in even the most fragile context represent a strategic tool for rebuilding societies strengthening resilience, breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty, and ensuring the production of positive social outcomes grounded in justice, empowerment, and equality as a result of this. So this week, we come together as a global movement to demand change. We call for governments to meet their commitments, to invest at least 4 to 6% of GDP and 15 to 20 of public budget in education. We keep repeating this call. We call for debate justice, to free up resources for public services, for progressive taxation, to build fairer and more sustainable systems. We call on governments to fund education, not war. We reject false solutions that turn education into a market, because education is a human right. And we call on wealthier countries to honor their commitment, including allocation of 0.7% of GNI to develop assistance with education as a priority. This is a moment that demands urgency and courage. So let us stand together in solidarity across countries and movements to defend public education and demand the appropriate funding and suitable funding it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Refat. Let us stand together in defending public education for all. So now we call on Grant Kasimanjete, GCE Global Coordinator, to share with us the calls to action of GAWE 2026. Over to you, Grant.
Okay, thank you so much, Thea, and greetings, colleagues, friends, and partners. We are here today, because education is not just a policy goal or a line in a UN document. It is the heartbeat of our communities, the hope of our children, and the promise of a fair world. But if we're honest, that promise is still far, from reality. Millions are excluded, schools are underfunded, and the global systems continues to favor profit over people. That is why GAWE 2026 is focused on 4 urgent priorities, 4 pillars that can turn this promise into progress. Number 1, accountability to SDGs. As Thea alluded earlier, when governments and donors pledged at the Transforming Education Summit to leave no one behind, they were making a promise to every child sitting in a classroom without books, every young person dreaming of a future, and every adult still waiting for their chance to learn. We are here to remind them that education is not charity, it is justice. It is repairing the wrongs of history and building a future where opportunity is shared. The second, financing public quality education. We know that when education is treated as a business, children pay the price. Profit has no place in classrooms. We stand for a strong public schools where teachers are respected, where learning is free, and where every child, rich or poor, has the same chance to thrive. Third objective, global financial reform. How can countries invest in its schools when it is drowning in debt, as is the current state with many countries in the global south? How can teachers be paid fairly when billions are lost to tax avoidance? We cannot transform education without transforming the system that keeps nations poor. That is why we demand tax justice and debt cancellation. Let us free up the resources that should be building schools, training teachers, and opening doors for learners everywhere. The last objective, public mobilization. Real change comes when people rise together. From teacher unions to youth networks, from grassroots movements to academics, the global campaign for education is powered by ordinary people with extraordinary courage and vision. Together, we will keep knocking on the doors of power until they listen. Colleagues and friends, GAWE 2026 is not just another campaign. It is a campaign to conscience. It is a reminder that education is the key that unlocks dignity, freedom, and justice. So I ask you 4 things. 1, speak up in your communities. 2, hold leaders to their promises. 3, stand against the privatization of our children's futures. And lastly, demand a fair financial system that puts people before profit. Because when we fight for education, we fight for hope. And when we fight together, we cannot be ignored. Let us rise, let us mobilize, and let us ensure that no one, no child, no youth, no adult is left behind. Thank you. Over to you, Thea.
Thank you so much, Grant. And thank you for those reminders of our work together. And one of the advocacy that we have for GAWE 2026 is ODA for education. And in fact, we have integrated the replenishment campaign of the Global Partnership for Education in our campaign for GAWE 2026. And so now we have the pleasure of the presence of our colleague from Global Partnership for Education, and she will talk about investing in education systems transformation and the relationship to the GPE replenishment. So colleagues, let's give a big hand to Brianna Ridsdale. She is the head of advocacy and communications of the Global Partnership for Education. Over to you, Brianna.
Thank you so much, Thea. Thank you, colleagues. It's a bit of a tough act to follow on Rifat and Grant, but I will do my best. And you have both laid out I would say both the challenge, but also the opportunity really, really well. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the Global Partnership for Education, there we are also 24 this year. So next year we'll have to celebrate our quarter century together. The Global Partnership for Education is a partnership as well as a fund for education. And we bring together the governments of 92 low and lower middle income countries, 24 donor countries, civil society organizations from both the global north, the global south, and representing the teaching profession, and also multilateral development banks, UN organizations, the private sector, and philanthropy. All of these organizations come together through the Global Partnership for Education to think about how we can address these challenges of transforming education and unlocking opportunity for the children in these countries. As Thea mentioned, GPE at the moment is in the midst of our 5th financing campaign under the campaign banner of Multiply Possibility, because we believe that this is really what education does, is multiplies possibilities for individuals, but also for nations. The financing campaign of GPE, as you can see here, has 4 pillars, all of which work together to raise the bar on financing for education globally. So we look to mobilize financing to the GPE fund. This is from ODA. We look to catalyze more co-financing, whether that comes from the private sector, from multilateral development banks, whatever suits the context of partner countries. So really raising more, crowding in, let's say, more financing into the education sector in partner countries. We seek to diversify the contributors to education, and all of that works on the foundation, and as Grant so eloquently said, of domestic financing to education, of national financing for public education systems, which forms the core and the base of everything that we do, and of the sustainable transformation of education in partner countries. So, Heather, if you'll flick to the next slide, GPE, we put together, we like the challenges are so great, but I think it's also a good moment to stop and reflect on the opportunity. And so this really is a slide that demonstrates what is the opportunity that we have of a fully funded GPE, which again it is a drop in the bucket of education financing, but we like to think it's an important drop. So if GPE's replenishment successfully mobilizes 5 billion from ODA, we would use that 5 billion to mobilize another 10 billion in catalytic co-financing, representing a 15 billion investment by 2030. And across our more than 90 partner countries, this would reach 750 million children with better education, whether that's textbooks, whether it's better trained teachers, whether it's better equipped schools, train 10 million teachers, distribute 325 million textbooks, and the spin-off effects of that improved learning would have long-term impacts on economies and on societies. Together with our partner countries and with domestic financing, we could see 204 million more children in school by 2030 and improvements in education, in learning in at least 100 million children in that period of time. So in the context of SDG 4 and of this final mile that we have as we look towards those SDG targets, we believe that this would be a huge contribution in pushing us towards that goal and in realizing the gains that partner countries need so much. So next slide, Heather, please. I want to start by talking about that domestic financing pillar. And first, I want to thank this network and all of the partners who are here for the phenomenal advocacy efforts that have been done so far. As you can see, of our 90 partner countries, we are nearly halfway to receiving some really bold and ambitious commitments to finance education, public education, over the next 5 years. So there's a really diverse list of partner countries that you can see here who have already made commitments that total more than 209 billion to finance education. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg, I will say, because these commitments are not just about the volume of education spending, but they're also about the quality of education spending. They're about efficiency, they're about equity, they're about policy measures to make sure that every child is included in school, girls, children with disabilities, displaced and refugee children. So we've seen some really bold and exciting commitments. And there are also some very interesting fiscal commitments, let's say, to look at innovative ways of financing education more sustainably in the future. And this really speaks to those reforms that Rafat and Grant were speaking of. On a national basis, partner countries are perhaps not committing to some of the big international financial reforms that GAWE is calling for so rightly. But there are also some very interesting and innovative domestic financing reforms that can be made in order to create more sustainable funding for education. And we are seeing some really exciting examples of that. So really, thank you so much for all the work that this coalition is doing. It is paying off. As you can see, we still have a long way to go as well on that list of partner countries. And we look forward as we work towards the final push in the Multiply Possibility campaign to seeing many, many more of these domestic financing commitments come in with your help. So please do reach out if your country is not on here. My colleagues Heather and Edwin, we have a toolkit that we provide that can help you mobilize and organize to really encourage all partner governments to make these commitments towards reaching SDG 4. Domestic financing is a huge part of the equation, but for GPE, ODA, of course, is also an important piece. And we know that in the world that we are confronting, where ODA is declining, it is first and foremost more and more important that we keep advocating for education to be prioritized in the way that that governments are spending that ODA, and second, for that ODA to be truly catalytic, for that ODA to be well used, for it to be used alongside domestic financing commitments in a way that's going to lead to more sustainable change, and ultimately that's going to lead to more self-reliance. And that's really what GPE is focused on over the next 5 years, is this transition to supporting countries to develop more sustainable financing frameworks for education. Because as Rifat said so eloquently earlier, we can't transform education without also transforming the way that education is financed. So as we head towards the last piece of the campaign, and Heather, I think you can move to the next slide now, we are asking for your continued support and help and collaboration. And we're so excited to be a part of this Global Education Action Week and to be holding the flame high together with all of you. These are some of the things that your friends and colleagues around the world have already been doing, and that we would really welcome this final push to advocate for increased domestic financing and accountability, and also to advocate for that increased international financing for education in general, and of course for GPE and for our sister fund ECW working in crisis contexts as well. One of the very important tools is to reach out to those representatives of GPE donors in your countries, to advocate directly with them through meetings or through writing letters, open letter campaigns, so that they understand that the demand for this is not simply coming from an international sphere, but also coming directly from national civil society. If you are a youth network, or if you work with youth-led networks, we also have the youth-led call to action, which has 30,000 signatures already, but we think that we can really get more. So please do share that youth-led call to action and encourage your youth networks to also mobilize behind the Multiply Possibility campaign and to join these advocacy efforts. And of course, we are happy to continue to coordinate with you through our monthly advocacy calls, through the support that my colleagues Heather and Edwin provide. And of course, many of you also know our Education Out Loud coordinator, Tanvir, who's also an available resource to you all. So I have tried to keep this very practical. Today, I think the global context has been well covered. We all know the urgency of this. This work is not going to be one and done once the campaign is finished, not for GPE and certainly not for all of you. But we really are looking forward to holding the flame high, not just this year, but over the next 5 years as we head towards the end of SDG. Together, we can really make a difference for so many children around the world in keeping education at the top of the global agenda. So I will conclude there and hand back to you, Thea. And once again, just a huge thanks for all the work. It really makes such a fantastic difference, and you all have my deep respect and admiration for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And for sure, our members will also engage their countries in terms of the country pledge. So now we go to one of the staunch supporters of the Global Partnership for Education. The United Kingdom has been supporting GPE since it started. And with us, we are honored to have one of the GPE board members. Let us welcome Judith Herbertson. She is the head of the Girls Education Department, Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO, United Kingdom. And she will speak about the commitment to leave no one behind agenda in education, the ODA for education. So over to you, Judith, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. We know that globally 61% of education financing comes from governments themselves, 36% from parents and communities, and just 3% from external sources. Yet the budget reductions across the global education funder system over the last year have been painful and deep, starting with the loss of US aid, but spreading right across the sector, all the way down through the UN system, the multilateral system, down to INGOs and implementing partners on the ground. But driving us possibly towards new, better ways of operating in the longer term. At the same time, the global context is shifting. We hear about polycrises, conflict, displacement, climate shocks, and inequality. And we're hearing about calls for a shift in policy principles to focus on justice, equality, and inclusion rather than on poverty per se. Perhaps a shift in the paradigm we'll see in the future, with a different social contract on tackling poverty, inequality, and injustice, with shared accountability and partnership, funding that is both impactful but innovative, an end to dependency on aid and its distortionary effects, huge political will, and policies and actions informed by research, evidence, and data. In the UK, we are absolutely committed to the Leave No One Behind strapline. We're also facing major shifts as a global donor. By April 2027, we will have cut our budgets to 0.3 ODA GNI, so official development assistance, as a proportion of gross national income. And we know many major donors are having to make similar cuts. And the uncertainty in the Middle East and of knowing where we're going is making all of this much harder. Our ministers have, however, been clear that less money does not mean less action. So our operating model will shift.
وبالتالي فإن فريق العمل الخاص بنا اضطر ليواكب هذه
shift to unlock growth, jobs, and trade through private sector as well as government funding. From focusing on service delivery to system support, strengthening systems to help countries build their education systems. Moving from grants to expertise, not removing funding altogether, but leveraging UK strengths in our world-class universities, education export and tech sectors. And then moving from international intervention to local provision to deliver better context-specific and tailored, sustainable, locally led solutions. As a paradigm, that will make a huge shift to how we work, to how intellectually we frame what we're going to do, and we hope to the impact of what we build in terms of partnerships. We will retain 5 specific priorities in education. Top of the list, always improving foundational learning outcomes for all children, but with a real focus on those most likely to be left behind. Girls, children with disabilities, children from marginalised groups. Number 2, strengthening education systems, including making those systems more resilient to the impacts of climate and conflict. Thirdly, increasing the scale and sources of financing, not just from us, but with a stronger focus on innovative mechanisms that will bring a higher return on investments than $1 in, $1 out. Particularly true in the area of disaster risk financing, where there are really good global products available. We're also already a major funder of the International Finance Facility for Education, which is just starting to deliver and provides a 7-fold return on our investments. Fourthly, safeguarding education in emergencies and protracted crises, including keeping children safe from violence associated with the education setting. And lastly, driving education architecture reforms so that our investments deliver better coordinated, more cost-effective impact for those countries with whom global funds and multilaterals are partnering. And throughout all of this, we'll mainstream support for women and girls, particularly preventing that violence I mentioned, and part of our overall campaign to tackle violence against women and girls, personally championed by our Foreign Secretary. Plus a focus on EdTech and AI, reaping the benefits while also keeping children safe from online harms and avoiding creating an even greater digital divide between and within countries. And lastly, we'll retain our focus on data, evidence and research to inform decisions over the use of scarce odour and to try to shortcut the route to impact based on what we already know works at scale. To reassure you, we will remain investors in both GPE and ECW. However, the global finance context will continue to make competition for funds for education very challenging. So we have to hope that by intentionally changing the paradigm, not just in the UK, but globally, devising new approaches to innovative financing and retaining a laser focus on priorities will help create a different future for all those children and young people around the world we're trying to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that paradigm shift. This is really important for all of us to know and also to guide our work. Thank you so much. And we look forward to further collaboration with the UK. Thank you, Judith. And now we go to the next presentation. And as we say, GAWE 2026 is coordinated with other campaigns. One is with the GPE replenishment. And now we're going to tackle another campaign that is being done, or another effort on education financing that is currently initiated by the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education. And this is the call for inputs on international financial architecture, debt, and the right to education. So that's the focus of the call for inputs. And with us is Maria Smirnova. She is the Human Rights Officer, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and she works very closely with the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, and she is going to share with us the call for inputs. Over to you, Maria, and welcome to GCE.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be part of this event. Thank you for inviting us to share with you our call for inputs for one of the upcoming reports of the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education. So I'm sharing the link to the report in the link to the call for inputs in the chat. And we are inviting contributions from civil society organizations, from states, from academics, young people, students, everyone who has anything to tell about international financial architecture, debt, and the right to education. As was mentioned already today, and as we know, the question of debt, austerity, macroeconomic policy approaches, and other mostly austerity measures and debt affect the amount of resources that are available for countries to spend on the right to education. And this is the focus of the next report of the Special Rapporteur. She is calling for inputs on specific practical examples, evidence on how these policies affect the right to education on the ground directly. And that's why we are here today to invite everyone who has anything to share. You don't have to answer the whole questionnaire. You can answer only questions that are related to your work. And that evidence will help the Special Rapporteur to draft the report with enough connection with real life. So, as you probably know, the Special Rapporteur, she drafts thematic reports, and this is part of her thematic work. She also does country visits. So, the next country visit will be to Bangladesh, where she can also explore these connections between international financial architecture and the right to education. And she also does complaints. So we can also always frame a specific concern that you might have on the ground in the frame of human rights complaints. So on the website of the Special Rapporteur, you can find a link to subscribe to her calls, her news, and you can always be aware of what's going on. The bottom line here, we really need evidence. We are open for partnership, and the Special Rapporteur is there to amplify your messages on how international financial architecture, debt, and other financial concerns, tax justice, affect the right to education on the ground. So get in touch. Let's work on this together. And we also have a youth network you mentioned earlier. It's the Right to Education Youth Network. It's currently around 2,000 young students from across the world, from 138 countries. The Special Rapporteur is in touch with them. She asks them, what do they think about education? What should it be like? What are the problems? What are the concerns? And then again, amplifies their voices in her work. So that's also just to raise awareness about this project. But yes, glad to be part of your conversation, and happy to be in touch with anyone who gets in touch with us. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I believe our next presentation will give the evidence that might help. Will give the evidence that will definitely help the report, because I'm going to call from the teachers union that has been very much affected by austerity measures. So to talk about end austerity measures, invest in teachers, I'm going to call Dennis Signolo. He is the director of Education International's African Regional Office. And so over to you, Dennis, for your presentation. And thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, and a big thank you to all the colleagues who have already reflected on Global Action Week 2026. I just want to check with you if you believe the statement I'm about to say is a fact or a myth. On current trends, SDG 4 will not be achieved by the 2030 deadline. Fact or myth? I believe you agree with me, colleagues, that it's a fact. We know that by 2030, we will be looking back and lamenting the failures of our government's commitment to achieve SDG 4 by 2030. What are the main challenges or bottlenecks? We have two main challenges from our research within Education International. The first challenge is that governments are not investing sufficiently in education. The second challenge is that governments are not investing sufficiently in teachers, whether it is their training, professional development, recruitment, salaries, and working conditions. So these are the major bottlenecks. So if we are going to change the situation, we need to tackle these two problems: investing in education and investing in teachers. Let's focus a little bit more on teachers. According to UNESCO, you probably know that 44 million new teachers are needed to achieve SDG 4 by 2030. That's the global figure. And 15 million of these teachers are needed in sub-Saharan Africa alone. So the greatest challenge, according to UNESCO figures, is in sub-Saharan Africa. And we also know from UNESCO research and evidence that teachers are not trained to national standards, particularly in developing countries. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, only about 60% of the teachers are trained to national standards. And unfortunately, the standards remain low or variable in a number of countries around the world. And then concerning teachers in conflict and crisis situations, the situation is even dire. Because, for example, in half of Nigeria's 36 states, teachers are not paid regularly. In South Sudan, for example, teachers haven't been paid for 2 years, and the highest paid teacher gets a salary of the equivalent of 18 United States dollars per month, not enough to buy a decent meal from a restaurant, for example. In Yemen, we have regions where teachers haven't been paid for nearly a decade. Yet we expect these women and men to show up in the classroom and deliver quality education. How? And then, of course, the biggest challenge we have is that of austerity. Austerity measures or conditionalities imposed by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and other international financial institutions. Education International and Action Aid are currently working or finalizing a study focusing on fiscal policy, public services, and the IMF. And this study covers 11 countries. And the analysis from these 11 countries, unfortunately, shows that the IMF is still recommending cuts or freezes to the public sector wage bill. And then, of course, if you do that, that means you affect the salaries of teachers because teachers happen to be the majority of public sector workers. In Kenya, for example, the IMF advised the government to extend wage freezes implementation from 2021 to 2026. In Malawi, the government is advised to rationalize expenditure through curtailing growth in wages. In 4 country cases, the fund laments that teacher unions and strikes have led to pressure to reverse government decisions to cut or freeze the public sector wage bill. So if they're crying that teacher unions are putting pressure to reverse these wage bills, then that's a good thing. It means we're making impact. We're making a difference. That's why teacher unions around the world and civil society organizations, youth organizations, like-minded NGOs should continue to work with us to challenge these measures. Now, we have seen the challenges. What then are the recommendations? How can we address these challenges, particularly the teacher challenge? Number one, in line with Education International's core public fund education campaign, governments should invest in teachers and education now. Through this campaign, we're calling for a quality public school for every child in the world, a public school where every child is taught by a highly trained, professionally qualified, motivated, meaning paid well, and supported teacher. And every child should learn in a well-resourced, safe, and healthy classroom. In this campaign, we're also challenging privatization, commercialization, marketization, and commodification of education. Recommendation number 2. Dear friends, it's important that governments implement the recommendations of this document. These are the recommendations of the UN Secretary General's High-Level Panel on the Teaching Profession, which were released in 2024 in Johannesburg. The recommendations call upon governments around the world to end teacher shortage and to elevate the status of the teaching profession. The recommendations clearly call for a specific focus on social dialogue as a key way of improving the teaching profession, including the working conditions of teachers. That's why it's important that governments engage in dialogue with teacher unions around the world. The third and final recommendation is that the IMF and all international financial institutions should remove all austerity measures imposed on developing countries. We call on international financial institutions and donor countries to end austerity and remove the debt burden imposed on developing countries. Allow developing countries to breathe and to invest in teachers, education, and other public services. In conclusion, dear friends, let's remember that teachers matter. Let us trust, value, and support teachers. Let's work together with teachers through Education International to organize and mobilize and demand an end to austerity. Governments should invest in education and teachers now. We're stronger together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I'm sure many of our participants here appreciate your presentation because I can see from the chat there are so many university teachers, professors in our webinar today. So thank you so much, Dennis, for sharing the advocacy of Education International and for demanding the right of teachers. So now we go to our next presentation. And with us, we have youth and student voices. And we are very fortunate to have two youth leaders with us. And one from Latin America and the Caribbean, and the other from Asia Pacific, specifically from my country, Philippines. So let me call first Tatiana Cardona. She is a youth leader from the Latin American campaign on the Right to Education, or CLADE. So over to you, Tatiana.
Hola, hola, ¿se
Hello.
escucha bien?
Can you hear me properly?
Bueno, me presento.
I'm
Mi
going to
nombre es
introduce myself.
Tatiana.
My name is
Hago parte del
Tatiana,
grupo de la
and
CLAD,
I
pero
form
también
part
represento
of
a la
CLADE,
red de
but I
jóvenes del CLAD
also
Alequía, donde
represent
somos
the
aproximadamente
youth
11.000 jóvenes,
network of
entre ellas
Alequia,
67.000
where we
mujeres de América
have
Latina y el Caribe.
many
Quiero
youth,
empezar con una
especially
afirmación
women
clara y
from
es
Latin
reconocer
America and
la
the Caribbean.
educación
And I want to start saying
transformadora de
that
género no es una cuestión técnica,
financing
es una
the
cuestión de
education
justicia y además es
it's
una
not a
condición
technical
fundamental
issue,
para
it's
avanzar a
a
la equidad
question
de
of
género,
justice, and it's a key
porque a través de la
um,
educación de las niñas y
requirement
mujeres pueden ejercer
to
sus derechos,
launch the
fortalecer
gender
su autonomía,
equality
transformar los roles de
campaign.
género
We need
que
to
se siguen
transform the
reproduciendo
gender
en
roles
la
that we
desigualdad en nuestras
see or
sociedades.
that lead to
Porque cuando
the
hablamos de
inequalities in our
financiamiento
societies. When we
educativo,
talk about
no
education
hablamos solo de
finance,
cifras,
we don't only talk about
hablamos de
figures, we
quién tiene
talk
derecho a
about
aprender, a
who
decidir
has
sobre
the
su
right to
vida
learn,
y a
to decide
construir su
on
futuro.
their life
En
and to
América
build
Latina y
their
el Caribe,
future.
una de
In
las
Latin America
regiones
and the
más
Caribbean,
desiguales del
one of
mundo,
the most
esa
unequal
desigualdad
regions
tiene un
in the
rostro muy
world, and
concreto
this
y son las
inequality
niñas y
has a
mujeres,
very concrete
especialmente
rule. And
aquellas
I'm talking about women and
rurales, indígenas, afrodescendientes y
girls
migrantes.
that
Y
come
hoy millones
from
de niñas y
rural
mujeres viven
areas
fuera
or
del sistema
immigrants,
educativo
and
o
a
en
lot
riesgo
of
de abandonarlo,
women are
no por
outside
falta de
the
esfuerzo,
school system.
sino
And
por
it's not
barreras
due to
estructurales
lack of schools,
profundamente
but due to
arraigadas al
structural
abajo, el trabajo no
barriers
remunerado, la violencia basada en
and
género, la
due to
pobreza
the
menstrual y los embarazos adolescentes. Nuestra
early
región de América Latina y
pregnancies
el
and
Caribe
violence.
mantiene
In
la tasa
our
más alta de
region,
embarazos
we have the
adolescentes del mundo.
highest rate
Alrededor
of
de 66
pregnancy, child
nacimientos por
pregnancy in the
cada
world.
1.000
We have about
adolescentes y más de
66 births
1.6
for
millones
every
de jóvenes
1,000
se convierten
adolescents and
madres cada año. Cuando esto
1.26
ocurre,
million of
sus
girls
posibilidades
that
de
become
continuar
mothers before
en la educación
they are
se
18.
reducen
And when
drásticamente,
this
por lo que
happens,
está
they
en juego
cannot
no solo son los
participate in
educadores y
education.
los
And
proyectos de
this
vida.
is
En
not
esta
only
semana
dangerous for the life, but
conmemoramos
also for the
la
future.
Semana de
This
Acción Mundial por
week,
la Educación.
which is
Se
the
está
WAGE
también
week,
celebrando en
we
Nueva
are
York
also
el Foro de
celebrating
Financiación para el
the
Desarrollo, que convoca el
finance
ESCOSOC como
for the
espacio de seguimiento de
development
los compromisos
by
de Sevilla,
ESCOSOC. We also have the
de la Conferencia
compromises
de
of
Naciones Unidas,
Seville of
en la que
the United
participamos
Nations
varios,
Conference,
como
in
la
which
Federación
we
Internacional de
all
Alquía, la
participated,
CLAE, la CNI, la Fundación
CLADE,
Malala,
SEWIN, and the Malala
y otros tantos
Foundation,
preocupados
and
por este asunto.
other
Tenemos
foundations that
siempre
are very
en
concerned
el
about this
momento
issue. We
vigilantes de
have to
movilizarnos en
be
torno a esta
to
cifra,
safeguard
porque el
these
aumento del gasto militar está
issues
drenando los
because
recursos
the
públicos.
increase of
Mientras los
army
países se invierten en
expenditure
guerras
is
y
affecting
destrucción,
the
los
public
servicios
services.
públicos y la
The
salud
public
básica quedan
services
relegados
are not
en esta
relegated,
disyuntiva de ser enfrentada.
and we
Además,
cannot
la
face the
inflación
problems. We also have
impulsada
issues
por
like
la
the
guerra
inflation
está
led by the war,
profundizando esa desigualdad.
which is
El
deepening
aumento
these
de los
inequalities.
precios de
The
la energía,
increase
de los
of
alimentos,
the
está
prices of energy
impulsando
and the
más países
food
a la crisis y el
is
sistema global
leading more
está
countries
logrando
to go
responderlo.
through
Una
crisis,
economía
and we're
global
not
fragmentada, como se ha
able to
nombrado
respond.
anteriormente, no puede
One of
garantizar
is the
ese desarrollo.
fragmentation,
La
which cannot
cooperación
guarantee
y una
this
no
development.
confrontación
The
es esencial
cooperation
para
is
abordar
key
las crisis sistemáticas en un
to
mundo cada
face
vez
the
más
systematic
dividido. Y
crisis
por
in a
último,
world that is
cuando las
every
reglas
time more
globales
divided.
rompen
And
bajo la
lastly,
presión
when we
geopolítica,
break these
los más
global rules,
vulnerables pagan el precio.
who are the
Un
most
sistema
vulnerable one are the ones that pay
injusto
this
y
price,
basado, eso,
because then
y
we
basado
don't
en
have
normas
a
y
just
margen de
system.
And due to this reality, we have to be clear. We need to guarantee the access to education and a transformative education in order not to have inequalities. And that's why gender education requires to change what we teach and how it is taught. And it also implies to change the learning information and also do that in safe places for women and girls. But we're not seeing this, and this transformation hasn't been founded. We need to have structural changes, and to face that, we need to be very clear that the gender transformation education is a political issue and as such needs to be financed. And we need to have specific resources for certain policies, like policies to guarantee the right of education, to train teachers, and including girls and indigenous girls and Afro-descendant girls when it comes to make decision, and also to get rid of these anti-right groups that are depriving these girls and girls to enjoy education. For every budget that prioritizes girls and women, it's what is going to lead us to have equality, and we need to invest in justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for that very
Thank you,
strong
Tatia.
message on
Gracias.
investing on gender transformative education. And so now we go from Latin America and the Caribbean. We now go to Asia Pacific, and let's listen to the message from Josh Bitalak. Josh Bitalak is the Constituency and Capacity Building Officer of INET Philippines. So over to you, Josh.
Thank you very much, and greetings to everyone joining us today. So my name is Josh, and I'm speaking as part of the youth constituency from the Asia Pacific region. When we talk about education, it's often treated as something everyone agrees is important. Education is a basic human right, many would agree. But in practice, it's not always treated as a priority. This is apparent in the way our education systems are funded. Across many countries in the Asia Pacific region, education systems continue to receive less funding than what's needed. This affects whether education is accessible, inclusive, and of quality. When education systems are underfunded, the impact is not the same for everyone. Those who are already facing barriers are the ones who feel it most. Learners affected by poverty, gender inequality, disability, or geographic isolation, those learners are further excluded. We see that many governments are already spending a large part of their budgets to pay off debts. Because of this, education is often competing for funding that is already very limited. But financing education should not depend on what's left over after debt and other obligations have been met. Education should also be a priority. It requires sustained and deliberate investment. And of course, a commitment to ensure that resources reach those who have been consistently left out and left behind. And we recognize that while increased funding is essential, it does not on its own ensure inclusion. Access alone does not guarantee equal participation. A school can exist and still be out of reach. A classroom can be open and still feel unsafe. A system can expand and still leave certain learners behind. This is why education systems need to be intentionally inclusive and gender responsive. Not all learners enter the education system on equal terms, and some face barriers that others do not. By addressing these barriers, we ensure that the increased funding and investment that we fight for also translates into meaningful inclusion. Education enables the young learners of today, the youth, to become nation builders that shape our shared future. And if we want to build societies that are truly inclusive, equitable, and just, then education systems must also reflect those values. This means ensuring that every learner is not only able to enter the education system, but is supported, respected, and able to fully participate, regardless of gender, ability, or background. It means building education systems that actively address the
بمعنى
barriers that
أن أنظمة
many
التعليم
youth
يجب أن
face.
توعي
And if you are serious about this, then education cannot remain underfunded and young people cannot remain unheard. So, as part of the youth, we stand not only to speak, but to call on everyone to take part in a shared responsibility, to invest in education as a sustained commitment, not a secondary priority, to ensure no one is left behind, not only in principle, but in practice, and to continue working together across communities, contexts, and countries to make the right to education a reality for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. And colleagues, I would just like to share that both Tatiana and Josh, they are very active in the GCE Youth Advocacy Group. Tatiana, as she mentioned, was part of the FFD4 contingent in Spain last year. And then tomorrow, Josh will be part of the budget advocacy in the parliament in the Philippines. So they're taking action and not only providing messages and analysis for us. So thank you very much to both of you. And so now we go to our next presentation before we go on break. So we talk about invest. However, how is the money being used in the education sector? And what is the impact of corruption and discrimination in education for all? So colleagues, at this point, we are very fortunate to have with us Samuel Kaninda. He is the Regional Advisor for Africa of Transparency International, and he will talk about corruption and discrimination in education and policy recommendations for education systems. So, Samuel, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cecilia. It's a pleasure to join you all for the launch of GAWE 2026. And there could not have been a better sequence in terms of the time at which I need to come in, picking up from what Tatiana and Josh mentioned. And I would like to speak about those barriers. You mentioned them, Cecilia, these which I could refer to as the elephant in the room. We know that when it comes to financing education, the world in which we live is compounded by a number of other crises. There are conflicts in terms of peace and security. There are pandemics that we've seen in not so distant past, diverting some of the resources that would be invested in education. But contrastly, the same pandemics also invite actually more investment in education in order to prevent the recurrence of some of these crises that we see. So from the work that we do at Transparency International, we cannot, of course, purport to tell you more about the importance of access to education. That's what you colleagues do. But it's just to highlight the importance of addressing some of the barriers. And that's why I was referring to what Josh mentioned when he talked about a few of the barriers. And one of them is actually corruption. Corruption and poor governance, as we know, there are impediments or major ones to realizing the right to inclusive and equitable education for all. And in this challenge is more pronounced in some of the regions, and one in which I work, which is Africa, where we see the disproportions in terms of overall access to education. but we need to zoom into some specific groups. We know that girls, people with disabilities, and other groups at risk of discrimination bear the brunt of the challenges that we already exist in terms of access to education generally. So our research shows that whether it is bribery, favoritism, conflict of interest, and you name it, it trickles down and leads to a lowering of quality of education, but it also gives a rise to barriers when it comes to access. And it takes a discriminatory form, exacerbating inequalities that exist in terms of service provision, generally speaking, but more specifically in our case here, talking about access to education for all. In a continent where we note that Mr. Signolo mentioned it earlier, Mr. Dennis Signolo, about the fact that as a global community, SDG 4 will not be met by the target year, but it's important to nuance this to say some of the regions in the world, whether you talk about Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and many of the other regions in the world, are even worse off when it comes to how far they are to attaining these goals. And what we also observe for our research is that where corruption is systematic, governments tend to spend less on public services in general, but education in particular. So we have all of these commitments in terms of how much of the national budget, in terms of the percentage or the proportion, should be allocated to the education sector, but all these remain decisions on paper, gathering dust, whether virtually or practically in drawers. So in short, what we are calling for by and large is to ensure that as we call for, of course, financing and more resources to be allocated to the sector, it's important to work together as stakeholders in the sector to make sure that there are systems in place to ensure transparent management of the resources that are already limited, and this has been emphasized, to ensure that they reach those who need it the most. And what we observe is that it's not always the case. We hear of commitments being made in many of the international meetings where global leaders would decide on allocations and make commitments, but this doesn't trickle down. It doesn't translate into the girl or the child who is in some remote location, a village or a town, somewhere in the world, who has no access to that information, seeing the quality of the education that they receive, if at all they have access, becoming a reality. So we call for systems to be put in place, not only codes of conduct, but anti-corruption provisions and clearly defined sanctions, because impunity is also what perpetuates the ills that we are seeing in terms of the corruption that we see. And this should be a concerted effort of both national, regional, and local governments to maintain these high levels of transparency in the disbursement of resources, as meager as they are, as we continue calling for these resources to be increased to meet the needs that will remain infinite. And this should be through clear and timely publishing of information to allow citizens, learners, parents, teachers, and all the other associations that are in place to have access to that information and hold those in positions of power to account. So timely publishing there is important. And those who provide services in the sector should also publish the data on how these resources are distributed, and including some disaggregation by socioeconomic, gender, and geographical indicators. So these are important, also together with strengthening existing oversight systems for storing and transporting resources are much needed for our goals in terms of achieving education for all in the world as a whole, but also making sure that those who are at the risk of being left behind are not left behind. It's important that competent authorities, especially in the education sector, work on these systems and that they are properly resourced to counter all the risks that exist for these resources that are limited to be embezzled. And of course, to ensure that there's more transparency when it comes to supplies in the education sector. We've talked about, there have been mentioned of recruitments and also making sure that the remuneration of those who are there to make sure that quality education becomes a reality. There's a fair redistribution of the resources that exist. And we believe that put together these measures, ensuring that information flows, that there is accountability for what is dispersed and what exists for decisions that are made in line with commitments, will take us a long way as we keep holding the flame high for education for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for sharing with us ways or measures by which we can combat systematic corruption. Thank you so much. And now we go on a 5-minute break. This is really important for all of us. So colleagues, we are a bit late. We are late by 19 minutes, but we still need a health break. So let's be back after 5 minutes. Stay on your stay connected in the Zoom. Stay logged in, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes. Okay, so the break starts now. And for colleagues who are still here, let's give a big round of applause to all our speakers in the first section. Please give your digital clap. Thank you so much for all of those great presentations. In the chat, I shared the survey. So if you're not taking a break, please have a look. But we will come back after 4 minutes now. Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, colleagues. Thank you very much. I hope we do enjoy our break. Apidin Olashipo is my name, and I'm the Global Director of Brain Builders Youth Development Initiative, and I'll be facilitating the second part of the session. Thank you very much. Like I said as well, what this session will focus on will be anchored on voices from constituency and key messages for the GAWE 2026. It will focus on calling to action and solidarity messages or around fair taxes, whereby we want to ensure quality public education for all. We also have the issue of solving debt crisis, financing for education, the issue of investment in education will also come up, and fund education and all world will also come up, and secure ODA for education as well. So we sincerely appreciate you for the patience is beginning of the event. So without further ado now, I will be calling on Nelsie Lizarazo, who is the GCE Vice President and the General Coordinator, Latin America Campaign on the Right to Education. So Nelsie, over to you.
Hello, Abiden. Hola a todos, a todas.
Hello, everybody.
Buen día, buena tarde, buena
Good
noche,
morning, good afternoon,
según en donde estemos en este
based
momento.
on where you are at this
Bien,
time.
me
Well,
han pedido hablar de por qué la
I've been asked
justicia
to
fiscal
talk
y
about the
por
tax
qué la justicia
justice
fiscal
and why tax
configura
justice
el financiamiento sostenible,
is the
el
sustainable
verdadero
finance,
financiamiento sostenible
or the real sustainable
para la
financing
educación pública.
for
Y yo
education
quisiera
or public
comenzar, y
education.
esto en pocos
And
minutos,
I would like to
diciendo
start
una cosa que aquí no hemos dicho,
by saying
que
something
desde
that we
mi punto
haven't
de
said
vista hay que decir
here. And from our point of view, I think we have
sistemáticamente, y es esta.
to say
Mientras los
systematically,
recursos públicos se
because
agotan
while
y
the
los
public
servicios
resources
esenciales
are
se
coming
ven
to an end and the essential
cortados, la
services
riqueza
are being
global
cut,
no solo
the global
permanece
wealth
intacta,
is not
sino que además
only
crece.
intact, but
La
also
riqueza
grows.
concentrada en pocas manos
The
no
concentrated
resolvemos, para eso tenemos que hablar.
wealth is in
En América
certain
Latina, una de
hands,
las
and I think that's what we
regiones
have
más
to talk
desiguales
about.
del
In
mundo,
Latin America is one of the
10%
regions
más
that are the
capta
most
más de la
uneven
mitad
of
del
the
ingreso
whole world.
nacional.
10%
Hay
is the
18
one to
millones de personas
captures
carecen de
half
acceso a
of the
servicios
national
como
income,
educación,
while
salud y
millions of
vivienda.
people
Hoy
don't
yo
have
defino
access
qué
to
sucede en cosas
basic
parecidas
human rights like
en
education,
África o en el
health,
sudeste
housing,
asiático
etc. I'm
o
sure the same
en
happens
otras
in
regiones del
Africa
mundo.
or Asia or
Aquí
other
es
regions of the
donde
world.
la cuestión de la
But
justicia
here
fiscal
is
entra
that
a
the
jugar
tax
un rol
justice
fundamental,
has a main role
tanto a nivel global como a nivel
at a
nacional.
national and
¿Por
international
qué?
level.
Porque resulta
Why?
que dentro de esa concentración
Because
extrema
in
que sucede a
that
nivel
extreme
global y
concentration
sucede
happens
también en cada
at
uno de
global
nuestros países,
level as well as in
hay
each of our
sistemas
countries.
fiscales
There are
permisivos
tax
y
systems
regresivos.
that are
Los
regressive.
multimillonarios, las grandes
The
corporaciones
multimillionaires, the
usan
great
mecanismos
corporations
complejos
use
legalmente habilitados
complex
para evitar
mechanisms that are
tributar, para
legally
evitar
implemented
pagar
to
impuestos,
avoid paying
canalizan
taxes.
ingresos a través
And
de
they
sociedades
channel
holding,
income
trasferencias
through
de
holding
holdings
companies,
sin revalorar,
to
utilizan
just do
estructuras
different
opacas en
things and
donde
use different
trituran el sector,
structures to
aprovechando
not
oficinas
pay
fiscales
taxes. So
y demás. Hay una serie de
they
mecanismos
leverage
que son
the
legales. Yo no sé si eso
all
eso
the
es
tools
corrupción.
that they can
Transparencia
use
Internacional lo
to
podrá decir, pero
avoid
resulta que
paying
hay
taxes.
miles de millones de dólares
So there's
que se
millions
evaden,
of
que se
dollars that are being
eluden,
evaded. So that are taxes that are not being paid,
básicamente desde las grandes fortunas, tanto de las
especially
grandes fortunas
the
globales como desde las
multimillionaires.
grandes fortunas
I'm talking about
nacionales. Ahí
international,
está la
at international
enorme
level
importancia de
as
la
a national
convención
level.
fiscal.
And that's why the
Entonces, uno de los llamados
tax
en este
convention is so
momento,
important. And
uno de los
so
llamados
one
a
of
la
the
acción
calls
es
that
que
we're
todos
doing is the call to
ciudadanos
action that
vemos
we
cooperación
owe
internacional
from where we are, like the international cooperation, the states, civil society, we have to push the approval of the fixed tax convention. It's a long way, but it's a way that we need to walk to eliminate all these series of mechanisms through which the money that our countries can actually use to invest in public education, in health, and other services are not being used.
Otra cosa será cómo se invierten, cómo cuidamos la transparencia, cómo cuidamos el buen uso de esos recursos. Pero los recursos que se
But the
generan en nuestros países
resources
se tienen que
generated in
quedar
our
en nuestros
countries
países a través de
must
impuestos,
remain in
de
our
impuestos
countries through
justos
the
y de
taxes,
políticas tributarias
just taxes,
progresivas,
and
es
also
decir,
via
políticas tributarias
progressive
que
fiscal
impongan
policies that
a
will
las grandes fortunas,
impose
a las grandes
more
herencias, a
taxes
los grandes
to the
capitales
richer
y no
and
a
also
las
to the
personas
bigger
que
capital and
con
corporations,
dificultad
and not to
sobreviven el día
people that
a día.
hardly
Así
can
que,
live the day-to-day
dicho lo
life.
anterior, solamente
So
quiero
having
decir
said
dos
the
cosas más
previous, I
para
only wanted
ocupar
to
los
say 2 more
minutos que se me han
things
dado.
so I can use the 5 minutes that I have remaining.
La primera de
The
esas
first thing
cuestiones
is
es
that
que la ampliación del espacio fiscal
the
vía
amplification of the
políticas
fiscal
tributarias
space via
progresivas
progressive
y
fiscal
justicia fiscal
policies and via
es la mejor ruta
fiscal
para la ampliación del
justice is the
espacio fiscal.
best way to
¿Por qué? Porque le da
amplify the
soberanía,
fiscal
autonomía,
space. And why is
independencia a
that? It's
nuestros
because
estados
it
para la inversión
provides
pública. De
independence
hecho,
to our
limita la
states
inversión, el
for
avance de la
public
privatización
investment.
del
And as a
caso de la
matter of
educación.
fact, it doesn't limit this
Y además, si
investment
se invierte en los
in
sistemas
favor of the
públicos de educación,
privatization of the
garantiza
education, and it also
de esos
guarantees
sistemas públicos, su
these public
robustecimiento en
systems
todos los
sustainability
sentidos, en el
in
sentido
all
del acceso, de la
senses,
formación de
in terms
profesores,
of
de la
access,
pertinencia
teachers
cultural de la educación,
training,
de
cultural
la
issues of the
cobertura en toda la
education,
trayectoria,
and
de la primera
also the
infancia hasta
coverage
que nos
of
jubilamos,
this education
con
for early
oportunidades
childhood
educativas
education
dignas
until we
para
die,
todos y para
by
todas.
providing
Entonces,
dignifying
nosotros
education
pensamos,
for
este
all.
es un elemento que
We believe that this
Por eso
element
la
is
lucha por las
key,
políticas
and that is
sociales
why we need to
progresivas en nuestros
continue
países
fighting for
por la
progressive
eliminación de estos
um,
mecanismos
fiscal
perversos a nivel
policies
global
and
es una lucha que tiene mucho
to
sentido,
get rid of
mucho
this
sentido para
pervasive and
nuestros sistemas públicos de
terrible
educación y para, como
in
dije ya, la garantía de
fiscal mechanisms that do not
derechos humanos.
guarantee
Y nosotros
the
pensamos
human
en ese
right
sentido
to
y nuestro llamado
education.
a la acción es para
So
todos,
our
es
action
para
call
nuestros
is for
estados,
everyone, is
que
for
tomen las
our
medidas
countries,
necesarias
so they
para asegurar
adopt
esas
the
políticas
necessary
fiscales
measures
progresivas
to
y
guarantee
para
these
hacer lo que
progressive
pueden hacer a
policies,
nivel
and
nacional para
for them
evitar
to do what
la
they
elusión
can
y
do
la
at
evasión
national
fiscal de las
level
grandes
to
fortunas en nuestros
avoid
países. Nuestro
fiscal
llamado también es a los
evasion
organismos
to
multilaterales, por
certain countries,
supuesto,
like in our
para el
countries.
impulso a
We
la
also
convención
make a call
fiscal.
to
Nuestro llamado es a la
multilateral
cooperación internacional
organizations
para que
and
acompañe nuestras
international
estrategias de
cooperations so they can
incidencia con un
support
financiamiento
our
sostenible para la educación
advocacy
pública
strategies for in favor of the
permite
public
impactar la
education,
normativa, las
and so
leyes y
they
la
can
política
have an
pública sobre
impact
políticas
on the
tributarias
laws and the public policy
progresivas y nuestro
on
llamamiento es
progressive
también para nosotros mismos,
policies, and
para
also
que
make a
no le
call to
temamos
all of us.
a
So we
tratar de
do not
comprender cómo es que
fear the
funcionan
fact that
todos
we
estos
try
asuntos
to
en cada uno de
understand
nuestros
how all of
países,
these issues
para que no
work
le
in our
temamos a hablar con
countries.
los ministros de
So we're not
finanzas,
afraid
no le
of talking
temamos a la
about to
economía
our
y
finance
empecemos a
minister. So we're
trabajar
not afraid
estrategias
of
de
our
incidencia
economy.
política
And therefore we start
para que efectivamente
working on
nuestros
advocacy
espacios fiscales
strategies
crezcan y
so
nuestros
our
estados
fiscal
cumplan con lo
spaces
que se
grow,
requiere
and
de
for
inversiones en
our
sistemas
states
públicos,
to
que por otra parte
comply
supera
with what is
largamente
required
los
in terms of
compromisos internacionales
investments, and
asumidos.
in
Si
order
no cumplimos
to
ni los
comply with
compromisos
our
internacionales
international
asumidos, pues estamos
commitments. Because
lejos
if we do not
de
comply with these
cubrir las
international
reales
commitments,
necesidades que
then we're
tenemos
not gonna
en los sistemas
cover the
públicos de
real
educación para
needs of
asegurar la
our
educación
people
como el
for
derecho
the
que es de
public
todos y todas
systems,
a lo
and
largo de
for
los
the
años.
education as it is a
Gracias.
right for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nelsie. That was very instructive, especially, calling on country to adopt necessary policies, especially at national level to avoid fiscal evasion, and also advocating for progressive fiscal policy. Thank you very much, Nelsie. And I'm going to be moving to Solange Akpo. Solange Akpo is the Regional Director, African Network Campaign for Education for All, and CEFA, and also the CSO2 representative at GPE. And Solange will be talking about solving the debt crisis and financing education. So the mic is yours, Solange.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in French. First of all, I would like to, I'm bringing you the brotherly greetings from the Education Campaign for All, and also it's a member of the coalition. Firstly, I would like to congratulate you as a global campaign for education for your regular collective mobilization that you are having. I should say that we are at a very critical point where the foundation of our societies are breaking. Now, to be able to gather all the education community around education financing is already a success. And to do it year after year and 24 years later, it is even more of a success. So congratulations to you. Now, in Africa, we are celebrating this at a time where many African countries are confronted to a vulnerability, a very high vulnerability faced to the debt. And this debt affects the ability to finance not only education, but also other social sectors. Although the request of education has never been so high, now, because of the demography, we are a young continent, and the number of the young is called to double by 2050, going to 830 million young people in Africa. But we see more and more that there is a population that is not in education is stagnant and is not reducing. It is even not very well estimated because the young people in regions of conflict are not very well accounted for because we don't have very good data collection. So in Africa, to express in the percentage of GDP have reduced to 2% according to public expenses, more especially in countries with middle income. And
cette situation arrive à cause des pressions que les États subissent pour rembourser la dette. Et plusieurs pays africains sont en situation de détresse.
These order to repay the debt, and they're stressing according to the debt. I'm not going to mention anyone here. I know maybe countries such as Ghana, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire, they are facing this pressure to pay back the debt. And doing that, they are unable to reach the indicators that have been agreed on. So the 4 to 6% of GDP allocated to education, or 15 to 20% of the budget. And this has a direct impact on the quality of education. Dennis mentioned it earlier on. Because of this chronic debt, we are unable to recruit the number of teachers in order to reach the quality, because now they are submitted to programs with financial international institutions such as the the IFM or the World Bank. Now, doing that, so they are also submitted to issues that are linked in the not able to pay the salaries of teachers. And we know that teachers and the health sector represent the greatest part of public services in our different countries.
Alors, notre appel à l'action.
So our call
Notre
for
appel à
action,
l'action
our
est
call
que
for action
nous
is that
joignons à l'action
we
de
need to join ourselves to
communauté
the
internationale
action of the
pour
international
réaffirmer que
community
l'éducation
in
non
order to
seulement est un
reaffirm
droit
that
fondamental,
education not only is it a
mais
fundamental
aussi
right,
la clé
but it is
pour
also the key
résoudre bon nombre de questions
in order to
auxquelles nous
solve
faisons
a
face
number
aujourd'hui.
of issues that we
Actuellement,
are
les
facing.
disparités en matière de
Currently,
genre,
disparity when it comes to
l'exclusion,
gender, exclusion,
les guerres, les conflits.
wars,
Et
conflicts.
si nous mettons
And
l'éducation
if
comme
we
investissement
place
prioritaire,
education
cela
as
peut
a
nous
priority
permettre
investment,
d'avoir une
then
société
it will
pacifique et
allow
résiliente
us to have
et
peaceful and
d'amorcer
resilient
le développement
societies,
durable
and also to start the sustainable development that
Nous voulons
Africa is
appeler la
waiting for.
communauté internationale
We'd
à
like to
trouver
call upon
une
the
solution
international
à la crise
community
de
to
la
find
dette
a solution to
et
the
porter
crisis
haut la
of debt
flamme de l'éducation.
and carry
Et qu'ils
high
mettent
the
en
flame
place des
of
mécanismes
education,
de
that they need to put
négociation,
in place
d'adhésion,
mechanisms of
d'annulation
negotiation
pour
of
les pays
debt
qui
cancellation for
financent
countries
plus
that are
le paiement de
financing
la dette
more the
que
payment
l'éducation.
of debt
C'est la
rather than
priorité.
education. They need to be
Nous
priority.
soutenons la
We
négociation
support the
en faveur d'une
negotiation
convention cadre
in
des Nations Unies
favor of a
pour,
convention
où les
of the
pays
United
africains ont
Nations,
montré un
where
leadership
African countries
formidable.
have shown an
Pour une
admirable
convention
leadership. We need
qui
a
mette fin
just
à cet
convention that
ordre
will
économique
end this economical order,
déséquilibré que nous avons
which is
hérité
unbalanced, which
de,
of course we have
la
inherited
période
from
après-guerre
the
mondiale et qui fait que
period after
les
the
pays
World
africains
War,
subissent
and
une
which makes
économie basée
African countries
sur
to undergo
l'extraction
an
des
economy that is
ressources
based on
minières,
extraction of
énergétiques et autres.
mineral and
Nous
energy
appelons
resources. We are
les
calling
institutions
upon
financières internationales à
financial
lever les
institutions
restrictions
to
tarifaires et à
remove
libérer les dépenses
austerity
consacrées aux
measures and
enseignants
also to
et
free
aux personnels
expenses that are
éducatifs.
made for students and
Nous savons que
learners
aura
and
beaucoup de conférences de
teachers. We
reconstruction du
know that
partenariat
very soon we
mondial
are
pour
going to have a
l'éducation
conference of
et nous
World
appelons
Partnership for Education.
les
So
bailleurs
we are
de
calling
fonds à
upon
saisir
to
l'opportunité
donors
de
to
cette
take this
conférence
opportunity of this
pour
conference
renverser la
in
tendance et
order to
financer
overthrow
l'éducation
the
en
trends and
respectant
finance education by
l'indicateur de 0,7%
respecting the
de
indicator of
leur PIB
0.7%
alloué à
of
l'aide
their
publique pour le
GDP
développement. Et nous
allocated
appelons
to
à un
public
dialogue
services and
soutenu
development.
entre
So we are
ministres
calling upon a
africains
supported
des
dialogue between
Finances et
African
les ministres
ministers of
éducatifs
finances and
afin de
ministers of
garantir un
education in
financement
order
adéquat
to
de
guarantee
l'éducation,
an
un
adequate financing of
investissement à
education
long terme qui est
and
l'investissement à long
long-term
terme le plus
investment,
rentable qu'un
which is
pays puisse faire
more
pour son propre développement.
that a country can do for its
Mais
own
comme
development.
Samuel l'a dit aussi,
But
nous
as
appelons à un
Samuel said
processus
it, we are also
budgétaire
calling
ouvert
upon
pour
budgetary
renforcer la
processes
transparence et
that
la
are open in order
responsabilité.
to strengthen
L'implication
transparency
des parties
and
prenantes, y compris la
responsibility, the
société
involvement
civile,
of
à
stakeholders,
l'élaboration des
including civil
processus
society,
budgétaires,
in the
au
elaboration of
contrôle et à
budget
l'exécution de
processes,
ces budgets.
control, and also
Nous
the
appelons les
execution of
pays
those
à appliquer
budgets.
des
So we are
politiques
calling
visant
up
à
the
attirer,
countries to apply
recruter,
policies
motiver
to
et
attract,
fidéliser
to recruit,
un corps enseignant
motivate
hautement qualifié
all
afin
the
d'accélérer le
high
développement des
qualified
compétences et
teachers in order to
des
accelerate
aptitudes
the development
nécessaires
of
à la
skills and
transformation de
necessary
l'Afrique.
aptitude to the transformation of
Enfin,
Africa.
nous
To
voulons
end,
appeler à ce
we
que
would like to
l'investissement des
call
ressources nationales
upon
soit
that the
ciblé
investment of national
sur
resources may
les
be
filles, les personnes
targeted
handicapées, les
on
populations
girls,
marginalisées,
people living with
et
disability,
notamment
marginalized
en
population, and
accordant une attention
by
particulière
giving a
à celles
particular
qui vivent
attention
dans des
to
zones
those who are
trop touchées
living
par les conflits et
in
les crises.
zones that
Ensemble,
are
portons haut
affected by
la flamme
conflict, but
de
together
l'éducation
let's raise
afin
high the flame of education
d'assurer
in
l'accélération
order to
de la réalisation
assure
de
the
l'ODD4
acceleration
et
of
les
realization
objectifs
of
éducatifs
SDG
de
4
la
and
stratégie continentale
indicative
pour
objective
l'éducation en
of
Afrique.
continental
Je vous
strategy for
remercie.
education in Africa. I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Solange, especially for the call to action from the open budget call to supporting dialogue across cross-ministry to, ensuring that our actions with international community are jointly, explored so that education can solve issues around gender inclusion, conflict, and war with a view to ending economic challenge. Those were very instructive. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share as well. So I'm going to move to Rene Raya. Rene Raya is a regional advocacy coordinator and lead policy analyst, Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education, ASBE. Rene Raya will be talking on invest in the futures of education. So I pass the mic to you, Rene Raya. Thank you.
Thank you. thank you, Abidin, and good day, everyone. So on behalf of the Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education, or ASBE, we extend our congratulations to and solidarity with the Global Campaign for Education, or GCE, and the education movement everywhere for keeping the flame alive for education. And certainly, it takes a movement, a community of peoples and nations to assert and fight for the right to education. As expounded by previous speakers, we live in a very challenging times. And so I won't be expounding on this anymore. In our region of Asia Pacific, the overall progress towards the SDGs and SDG 4 has been slow and constantly at risk of reversal. Significant regression has been noted in SDG 4.5 on eliminating gender disparities and ensuring equal access to education for all. We are actually failing to reach the most vulnerable and excluded, which are actually the key promises of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Governments and donors have also been ignoring SDG 4.7 on global citizenship and education for sustainable development. There are no clear indicators for SDG 4.7, no significant data available, and no respectable funding as well. Similarly, persistent data gaps exist for SDG number 5 on gender equality and SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. The annual country spotlight reports, which are being done by our national education coalitions around the Asia Pacific region on SDG 4, found only very little programs on climate change education, and funding are hardly visible, hidden in bigger budget lines, or too marginal to make any difference. The budget for peace education, well, actually small as they are, have been decreased further and diverted to security. The youth action research that has been carried out in several countries across the region found high incidence of discrimination, bullying, and violence based on identity, gender, and race. Yet, there are hardly funds for child and social protection. Actually, our region hosts some of the most elitist, exclusive, segregated, and discriminatory education systems in the world. They must all be changed. We need a fundamental shift in our funding strategy. Apart from progressively and equitably increasing financing for education, we need to invest beyond the core learning competencies to the more critical aspects of future's education for peace building, social inclusion, climate change education, environmental studies, human rights education, gender transformative education, and sustainable development. We need to reimagine education, adapt a new social contract for education, invest in the futures of education. ASBE and GCE believe that education is a critical enabler for peace, social justice, and all other SDGs. We believe that education builds more inclusive and peaceful societies, helping us to understand each other, fight extremism, and break cycles of poverty and violence. It promotes gender equality and equity, helping us challenge discrimination and create fairer systems for everyone. And this we call on our governments and our development partners. So in solidarity with social movements around the world, we pursue our call for social justice, for peace, and for the right to education for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renea. That was very direct, especially, emphasis on the youth action research, the need for us to change our funding strategy, the need for us to invest beyond core learning competencies to climate change education, human rights education, gender transformative education, et al. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I sincerely appreciate you. So I'm going to pass the mic now to Tasnim Almouzi. Tasnim is the Regional Coordinator, Arab Campaign for Education for All. Tasnim will be talking on fund education, not war. So Tasnim, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Abidin, and it's my pleasure to be here to share the message of solidarity and to raise our voice to call to end war and fund the education, not war. I'm here representing the Arab region on behalf of the Arab Campaign for Education for All. I would like also to thank the GCE for this very important platform. And I would like to start by highlighting that as we gather here today to hold the flame high for education, the same flame is being extinguished daily across our Arab region under the weight of wars and conflict. We are not facing a crisis of resources, actually, we are facing a crisis of priorities. And we must confront uncomfortable truth. Where is our money going? When the global military spending exceeds $2.2 trillion annually, while the education financing gaps remain in tens of billions, the question is no longer, can we finance education, but it is, why aren't we? In our region, the answer is both clear and painful. In Sudan, around 19 million children have been affected by war. In Yemen, more than 2 million children are out of school. In Syria, over 2.4 million children remain excluded from education. In Lebanon, the war have left around 500,000 students out of school. And in Palestine, over 750,000 have been detained their right to education. These are not just numbers, they are a generation being pushed out of the future. We are witnessing the reshaping of education within a war economy, where resources are drained and priorities are distorted, and education shifts from a fundamental right into casualty of conflict. But the most important truth remains. Education is not only a victim, it's a solution. Education is not the result of stability, it's a foundation. Every dollar not invested in education today will cost for more tomorrow in instability, poverty, and prolonged conflict. And this is why this movement calls not only for shifting priorities, but for ending wars. Lasting investment in education cannot exist without peace. It's a precondition. So our message is very clear. Education must be treated as strategic investment to reshape reality, not just a budget line. Education is a life, while wars drain resources and erodes the condition for survival. The message of the Arab region today is demand for structural transformation, starting by redefining security. True security is not built with missiles, but with education. Every dollar not spent on wars is a dollar stolen from school desk. Secondly, integrating education impact into policy assessment. Any military or financial decision must be measured by the educational losses it produces. Thirdly, protecting education in conflict. Schools, students, teachers must be protected under international law, and the learning must continue even in wars. And finally, reconstruction begins with the schools. In post-conflict recovery, education must come first. And our message of solidarity. We stand with every child in Gaza or Lebanon who dreams of a notebook and pens beneath the rubble. We stand with every teacher in Sudan who continues teaching intent to keep hope alive. We stand with every girl in Syria denied her classroom and every Yemeni child searching for a school. And finally, we stand in solidarity with the spirit of every child who left this world too soon, deprived from their right to life and all that it holds. Each of these children carried dreams that were never given the chance to grow. voices were never heard, and futures that were unjustly taken. Their loss is a painful reminder of our collective responsibility to ensure that no child ever is left behind or detained their most basic rights. Today, as we say, hold the flame high for education, we are not speaking of a symbol. We are speaking of a responsibility. A responsibility to protect the flame from being extinguished under the rubble of war, and to redirect the world's resources towards what sustains life, not what destroys it. Because education is not a luxury. Education is not a postponed choice. It's the only path toward a just and lasting peace. And thank you for this opportunity. And remember, hold the flame high for education.
Thank you very much, Tasneem. That was instructive. It's an emotional speech, if I must say that, talking about the statistics from Syria to Sudan to Lebanon to Palestine. And I like the fact that, you call for redefining of education, you call for integration of education, impact into policy framework. You also made mention of the fact that student teachers must be protected in war, and education should be prioritized against all odds. Thank you very much for that opportunity. And I'm going to move to Jifok Manukian. Jifok Manukian is the, apologies if I did not pronounce that name correctly, is the GCE board member, Europe and North America Campaign for Education. Jifok will be talking on secure ODA for education. So the mic is yours.
Thank you, Abidan. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please. You should be able to. Let me see. Are you able to do that? Or Anjum, can you make him a co-host, Salma? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dear colleagues, I speak on behalf of the ENAC. I warmly greet the 24th annual GAWE campaign, and I pass ENAC's messages of solidarity to all of you. This year, ENAC was unable to organize a special regional webinar, but many of our coalitions will hold local events, including those in Albania, the USA, Ireland, France, Norway, Armenia, and Artsakh. But can I? I want to use my presentation. Okay, thank you. Sorry. This year's GAWE theme is education financing, but it is not an end in itself, nor a narrow sectoral issue. Financing education is not an expense, but the most effective investment and guarantee for the development of all spheres of human life. Today's reality is that some nations have accumulated unprecedented wealth and serve as donors, while many others struggle with debt, poverty, and limited access to quality education, and therefore need assistance. Why is this so? Last month, on March 25, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution recognizing the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery as the gravest crimes against humanity. This is one of the ways in which the wealth of donor countries was accumulated, and the development of many nations has been disrupted. Nations that have suffered for centuries are not asking for charity through ODA, but for a modest return of wealth through that was unfairly accumulated over generations. It should be said clearly, ODA is not charity. ODA is a matter of justice. ODA must be understood as a tool for progressive redistribution. Let's look at how the world spends its wealth. Global military spending grew to approximately 2.44 trillion in 2024 and likely reached 2.6, 2.8 trillion in 2025. At the same time, the world is failing to meet its UN SDGs and transforming education summit commitments, including missing 97 billion annually needed for SDG 4. Let's imagine only 3.9% of military spending could cover the missing sum for education. The world should not be ruled by injustice and force. The rules of the jungle are not for humanity. Humanity should not allow violence and injustice to triumph. Civilization should not allow the rights of the peoples of Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, Artsakh, and other conflict-affected nations to remain violated. Justice must be restored to these peoples. I have three messages for all countries, and first of all, for the countries of my ENAC region, which constitute an overwhelming majority among the permanent members of the UN Security Council and the G7, and therefore play a decisive role in the world. Message one, countries must honor and exceed the long-standing commitment of allocating 0.7% of national income to meet SDG 4 and to allocate the missing 97 billion annually by redirecting a small portion of global military spending. Message two, all governments must support international tax justice and debt cancellation by adopting the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. Message three, the world must restore and respect the rule of law in international affairs and respect the UN Charter, all human rights conventions, including the 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949. I conclude with our motto, let us hold the flame high for education. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate that, Jeffa, because our time is fast spent. I would like to call on Ashina Sumi now. Ashina Sumi is the GCE board member, International NGOs Consistency, and Ashina will be talking on secure funding for quality public education for all. So the mic is yours, Ashina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and greetings and solidarity, colleagues. Thank you for your robust participation in this very timely and important discussion. Thanks to GCE and all of the members for agreeing that we have to have a rallying call at this moment for education, that we have to remind decision makers that they must hold the flame high for education financing. So on behalf of the Ingo constituency, I share this brief solidarity statement. I'll make it brief because like you've shared, we're running out of time. Amid the mounting global crises, we are alarmed to see that the world is actually turning away from one of the greatest proven investments for peace, for our collective prosperity, and for equality, and that is education. We acknowledge that we have made significant progress in improving access to and completion of education globally, but we are alarmed to see the pace at which things are turning around and not for the better. The progress that countries have made so far is eroding. According to the latest GEM report, as I'm sure we've heard today, more than 273 million children and youth are out of school today. And this is the 7th year in a row that this number has risen. This is an unacceptable trajectory. We also acknowledge that there are 234 million children and adolescents who are currently affected by crises and urgently in need of deepened educational support. We must acknowledge that in these difficult times, those already facing marginalization, including girls, children with disabilities, refugee children, and those affected by extreme poverty, are the ones who are being hit the hardest. This is a deep betrayal of the commitment to leave no one behind. So we stand in solidarity with children, with young people, with teachers, with education activists of goodwill worldwide to urge decision makers to hold the flame high for education. Countries have to dig deeper to commit more domestic resources to education and ensure that these resources are allocated and spent in a way that addresses existing inequalities. We must work on increasing the fiscal space available for education through tax justice. And this includes sealing the loopholes that have enabled illicit financial flows and tax abuse, and supporting the UN Tax Convention that is a global effort towards these ends. We also will not shy away from continuing to call for debt cancellation and debt restructuring for the countries, especially those that are spending more on debt repayment than on education, and to rally countries to support the UN Convention on Sovereign Debt as well, because we acknowledge that these structural shortfalls need to be addressed in a structural way. We continue to call for countries to fund education, not war, because education inspires hope and builds lasting peace. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. And I sincerely appreciate you for helping us to manage the time, Ashina. I appreciate. So my colleague just shared, the feedback form as well in the chat box. Please kindly check through it and help us to fill the feedback form. So the Global Campaign for Education is launching a new website, and I'm sure we are all excited about that. So coming up to talk about that briefly now is Medasoni, who is the Media and Communication Officer for GCE. Medasoni, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It's always a bit of a challenge to be the last presenter, but here I am with some very exciting news, and I would like to definitely take every second of my 5 minutes. So I will not even try to be shorter than that, because as it is, I think 5 minutes is a bit of a challenge. Let me just quickly share my screen so that we can just go through some very brief slides. I don't know. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes, loud and clear. Education. Very cool slide.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me also just, I don't want my video to go off, so I'm just going to switch it off for the next couple of minutes. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us, and we're very happy to launch GCE's new website. It's a revamped website from what we used to have at www.campaignforeducation.org. And this launch comes at a very important moment for us. As you know, we also kick off Global Action Week for Education 2026. And our new digital home is designed to better reflect who we are, what we stand for, and how we support advocacy for free, inclusive, quality public education for all. Just a very brief slide for those of you who may be newer to GCE. We are a global movement made up of activists, teachers, students, parents, and communities working together to defend the right to public education. We bring together national education coalitions, civil society organizations, teachers, unions, student groups, and youth across more than 100 countries. And with over 30 years of advocacy and countless lives that have been impacted, our role is to help really to hold governments accountable for SDG 4. So this website is our new digital home, and it has been fully redesigned to be clearer, to be more modern, and to be more useful for our global community. It is built to make it easier to find what you need, whether that's news, whether that's campaign materials, whether that's policy resources or youth publications. In short, we wanted a platform that is easier to navigate, and it's easier to access, and it's stronger in its impact. I think one of the most important things about this new site is that it was built for our global movement. It more efficiently supports 5 languages: Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, helping us connect more meaningful across the regions. We also wanted inclusion to be built in from the start. So the new site follows what we call International Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG guidelines. This basically means that the pages are structured for screen readers, for those browsers who may require a screen reader. It has clear headings and a good color contrast, so making it more accessible. It is also, and very importantly, mobile and tablet friendly and responsive. So, if you're browsing it on your phone or on your tablet, the layout customizes itself so that you can view it in the best way. And it's also for people who use Zoom or browse on different devices. So it's quite dynamic in that way. And also we have included right to left support for Arabic. And please do feel free to browse all of these different languages. It's basically built in a multilingual way, so we can reach people who can read and interact in their own language. The launch of the website is also closely tied, of course, to GAWE 2026, with the website a key home for the campaign. So through the site, you can access the campaign pack, engage with upcoming events, such as the upcoming GCE side event to the ECOSOC Financing for Development Forum coming up day after tomorrow on the 22nd of April, and the Global Youth event coming up on the 23rd of April. So this is not just a website launch, it's also a mobilization tool for this year's global action. A major feature of the new website is the Education Financing Observatory, or the EFO. Now, this is a space dedicated to monitoring and advocating for equitable education financing worldwide. It basically brings together real-time spending trends, country financing data, advocacy resources, etc., that can help shape policy decisions. So the EFO plays, it's an important role in giving GCE members the evidence they need to push for more and better funding for education. We are also excited to highlight the GCE Learning Hub, which is our capacity building platform for advocates, for coalitions, and for civil society actors. So the hub offers more than 15 courses in 5 languages and with open access basically for anyone with an internet connection. It's also designed to make learning more flexible and more inclusive so that advocates can build their knowledge and skills wherever they are. Just coming now to the last 2 slides of my presentation. Youth engagement is another major part of this website. This section reflects that young people are not just participants in education debates, but they're co-architects of education. So the website brings together youth-focused resources, including the GEMR report, Youth Report 2026, work on EdTech and AI, GCE statement for the International Day of Education 2026, and stories of youth advocacy across the Asia Pacific. So it gives greater visibility to youth perspectives, and it basically makes it easier to access and share that work. So how can we get involved? There are several entry points to the new site. You can explore the site in your own language. You can join GAWE by downloading and sharing the campaign pack. You can use EFO data to strengthen advocacy on education financing. You can, of course, subscribe to our GCE Buzz newsletter, which comes out once every 2 months, and it's something that you might definitely want to check out. You can enroll in the Learning Hub, and we would love for you to share your own stories through the Stories of Change. So, through this site, we really want to make participation easier and more visible and more connected. And my last slide, so with that, I'm very happy to say that the website is now live. We invite everyone to visit campaignforeducation.org, to please explore it, to share it, and use it as a platform for action. And please also help us highlight the GAWE messages by using these hashtags, fund education, hold the flame high, on your social media handles. So thank you very much for being part of this launch and for continuing to stand with us. And yes, and we officially proclaim the GCE website launched and live. So please browse and enjoy. And of course, we would welcome your feedback on any way that we can improve on what we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Medasuni. That was very, very awesome. I love the website sleek. And we're going to be ending this conversation by calling on Grant to give us the thanks and the call for action for GAWE 2026. So over to you, Grant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abedin, and a big thank you to all our speakers that really dedicated their time to this, and also a special thanks to all the moderators that were here, and our always interpreters who are always ready to join in a very short notice. We say thank you for your time, and for our speakers, thank you so much for their inspirations that you have shared with us. A lot is changing in the world, but we will never stop to raise out the flame of education high. So we will continue to do so. We invite you to really share all these materials for GAWE with your members. Let's make GAWE count this year. As I said earlier on, this is not just one of those campaigns, but this is a campaign of conscience. Let's really knock all the doors of power until all the doors are opened. If we continue, if we strive, they will open, and we'll see a lot more resources being provided into education. So thank you so much for participating, and a special thanks to the team within the Secretariat that organized all of this. It takes a lot of work, to do that. So let's give them a thumbs up for really dedicating a lot of time. I will not go to mention who they are, but it is really a lot of work. And special thanks to Meda on the website. We have now a new website. The previous ones were cluttered, lots of things, very difficult, but we do have now a new website. And colleagues, this website is not for the Secretariat. It is your website. So let's make use of it. Let's go in there. Let's publicize this website across the education sector. Let's make this GAWE count. Thank you so much for your time. Now we have come to the end of our meeting. Over to you, Abedin, for the last words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I sincerely want to appreciate every one of us for the opportunity to attend the Global Action Week 2026 Global Launch. And on behalf of the Global Campaign for Education, I would like to pass the mic now to Cecilia Tia, who is the Campaigns and Communication Manager, for the closeout as we end. Thank you.
All I can say is happy GAWE 2026, and let us all stand for education, for the right to education. Thank you so much. Bye. All the best
Thank you.
for GAWE 2026.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye to all.
Bye.
Bye.
Forward is a flame.
Bye. See you.
Bye.
See.
Keep the flame burning.
Keep the